The Greeks begged the great warrior Achilles to come out and fight, but still he refused to join the battle. But his best friend, whose name was Patroclus, came up with a cunning plan. He secretly put on the magnificent armour of Achilles and went out into the battle, looking exactly like the great hero. He knew that when the Greeks saw him, they would gain courage at the sight of Achilles and fight with redoubled strength, and when the Trojans saw him, they would think that the warrior they most feared had returned and would lose heart. When the Trojans saw Patroclus dressed like Achilles, Prince Hector flew at him with his spear and killed him. Only then did he discover that it was not Achilles whom he had killed, but Patroclus. When the mighty Achilles heard that his best friend had been killed by Hector, his anger and sorrow were great in equal measure. He stood up before a meeting of the Greek army and said, "As you know, King Agamemnon has insulted me, and I have every right not to fight in this stupid war. But now things have changed. My best friend has been killed by Prince Hector of Troy. It is for the sake of Patroclus, who is dearer to me than any other man, that I will take up the fight and avenge his death." And when the Greek army heard this, they all cheered and threw their helmets in the air, for they knew that with Achilles on their side, victory could be theirs. When Prince Hector saw that Achilles stood once again at the head of the Greek army, he knew that there was only one thing for it. He must go out and fight Achilles and decide the fate of Troy. As he was leaving for battle, he went in search of his wife, the lovely Andromache. He found her walking along the great walls of the city, holding their little baby in her arms. When she saw her husband, Andromache said, "Brave Hector, I beg you, do not go out today to fight Achilles. What will I do when you are gone? Think of your little son. What use is a father to him if he is dead?" But Hector replied that he could not refuse to fight, as the Greeks and the Trojans would say he was a coward. He stretched his arms towards his child, but when the boy saw the horsehair plume that nodded fiercely from his father's helmet, he was scared and cried, nursing his head into his mother's bosom. His father and mother laughed to see him, but Hector took the helmet from his head and laid it all gleaming upon the ground. Then he took his darling child, kissed him, and dangled him in his arms, praying over him to Zeus, the king of all the gods. "Mighty Zeus," he said, "may one day people say that this child is even braver than his father and a mightier warrior in battle, so that their praise gladdens the heart of his mother." Hector rode out before the gates of Troy. Achilles, seeing him, started to run with all his might towards Hector, ready to hurl his spear at his hated enemy. Hector jumped from his chariot and stood firm waiting to meet his enemy. But secretly he thought to himself, "What if I were to lay down my shield and helmet, lean my spear against the wall, and go straight up to noble Achilles? What if I were to promise to hand back Helen, who was the cause of all this war, and to let the Greeks take half of all the treasure in the city? But why argue with myself this way? Were I to go up to him now, he would show me no mercy." As he pondered, the swift-footed Achilles charged up to him as if he were Ares himself, the plumed god of battle. The bronze tip of his spear gleamed around him like the rays of the rising sun. Fear came over Hector, and he turned and ran, while Achilles darted after him at his utmost speed. As a mountain hawk, swiftest of all birds, swoops down upon some cowering dove. That is how Achilles made straight for Hector with all his might, while Hector fled around the city walls as fast as his legs could carry him. Achilles chased Hector 3 times around the walls of Troy, until at last Hector turned and fought. First Achilles threw his spear at Hector and missed. Then Hector threw his spear at Achilles and hit his shield, but did not break it. Then they fell upon each other with clashing bronze swords, and Achilles, for he was the stronger hero, killed Hector. When they heard the sad news, all the women of Troy wept for the loss of their greatest hero, but none wept more than his wife, Andromache. Now that the finest hero of the Trojans was dead, the Greek army thought that they would soon win the war. King Priam of Troy greatly grieved the loss of his bravest son, and feared that the city would soon be defeated. But this is not how things turned out. Not yet. For Apollo, the winged god of the silver bow, again decided to help the Trojans. One day, in the midst of battle, he came up to Prince Paris and spoke to him as follows. "Hail, Paris, Prince of Troy! Lift up your bow and fire an arrow into the Greek army. I will guide its point into Achilles and kill him." When he heard this, Prince Paris replied, "Almighty Apollo, I will gladly do as you ask, but will I not just waste my arrow? For everyone knows that when Achilles was a baby, his mother dipped him in the river Styx that runs through the underworld, and as a result, no weapon can wound him, for the waters of the river Styx make a man immortal." And Apollo replied, "Paris, you speak the truth, but the gods gave the great Achilles a choice. He could lead a short and glorious life, or a long and boring one. He chose glory, and so his life must be short." And so Paris dipped his arrow in deadly poison and fired it into the air. It flew in an arc, and its poisoned tip drove into Achilles' heel. For when Achilles' mother had dipped him in the river of the underworld, she had held him by his heel, and no water had touched it. And now Achilles fell from his chariot, and soon his great body lay on the ground, dead.